Welcome back everyone, Mindy here with you today for Neat Tangled, and I'm going to be showing you how I created this card using the Lovely Lotus stamp set. This stamp set is a nice size stamp set. It's 6 by 8. It has lots of blossoms and leaves and some gorgeous sentiments on here. So the first thing I'm starting off with is I'm going to be stamping my images. I think I used about every image on this stamp set. And what I'm just doing is I loaded those images up into my MISTI tool. I have a piece of BRISTOL smooth cardstock that I'm prepping with an anti-static powder tool. And then I'm inking up my images using the Simon Says Stamp clear ink. This is a great embossing ink because I'm going to be doing some heat embossing. So I just stamp all of those down, giving it some really good pressure so I have a nice impression of these images. And then I'm going to sprinkle on some white satin pearl embossing powder. This is from Hero Arts. This is a really pretty embossing powder. It's white, but it has just that really nice satiny sheen to it. And that's going to really pop off of my images once we get to the ink blending. So I'm just sprinkling that all over my cardstock, making sure all of that is covered. I'm doing that just on a scratch piece of paper. And then I'll just dump that back into my jar for later. And then I'm going to heat emboss this with my heat gun. I do have that heating up off on the side, and then I'll come and apply it to my paper. That just helps reduce some of the warping that you may get from heat embossing. And I know it's really hard to see on camera here because it's the white on white, but it does have that really nice pearly sheen to it. So trying to tilt that here for you, catch it a little bit. So I'm going to set that off on the side, and then I'm going to stamp the leaves. And these are two really large images. So I'm doing this the same way. I'm using BRISTOL Smooth cardstock. The reason I'm using the BRISTOL Smooth is because I plan on doing ink blending, and I just really like how the inks kind of just glide over the BRISTOL Smooth cardstock. You can do this on Neenah Solar White cardstock too. It just takes a little bit more work to blend those two colors together. So this is just my personal preference. If you're having trouble ink blending, I definitely recommend the BRISTOL Smooth. And then I'll just go ahead, heat those up as well. Make sure that embossing powder is nice and melted. Next, we're going to work on some ink blending. So I am working on a craft sheet here, craft mat, that just kind of helps protect my work surface. And I'm using Wilted Violet Distress Oxide. This is the first shade I'm going to do. This is my darker color. And I'm just taking a small finger dauber and going around the bottom of the flower. I'm not being too particular on how well that's going on. I'm not worried about going outside of the edges because the dies, the coordinating dies actually cut this really close to the edge of the petals. So you don't have to worry about staying inside of the lines or anything. So just going in some really nice circular motions, doing that darker color towards the bottom. And then I'm going to come in with shaded lilac, which is a little bit lighter of a purple. And I'm doing that towards the top of the flower. And I'm going to blend that in to the Wilted Violet. And these are just some really great contrasting colors, really kind of gives that some definition to the flowers. And I'm going to use this combination throughout all of the flowers on here. I may shift where I put the darkest color on some of them, but it's all the same process, all the same technique, just adding that darker color in one area and then the lighter color, the shaded lilac, to another part of it, and just blending those two together. Next, I'm going to work on the stems, and I'm just using this small blender brush to apply Evergreen Bough Distress Oxide. So I'm doing the stem, I'm going up a little bit into the flower. Like I said, not really worried about staying inside of the lines or how well that's blending right there. Kind of going for more of an artsy look with it, so it doesn't have to be perfectly blended, perfectly lined up, just kind of having fun with it. And I'll apply that to all of the stems. And then once I'm done with all of this, I'm going to take a cloth and I'm just going to buff off all of that excess ink that's over the top of that embossing powder. And this is going to make that just kind of pop through with that pearly sheen. So just wiping off all of that excess ink. That embossing powder resisted all of that ink, so Emboss Resist would be, I guess, the technique that I used for this. Making sure I have all of that off. And this is just a really fun way to color up flowers if you don't want to do your markers. I like doing the ink blending on the flowers. Next, I'm just going to spritz some water down, and I'm going to twirl that around with my paintbrush and flick on some specks of water. I really like how this turned out because this reminded me of water droplets. So this was super cool. I was impressed with how it came out. And I'll just go around all of the flowers, adding a bunch of speckles. And I'm actually going to let that sit off on the side to dry. If you let it sit on its own and do its oxidizing, picking up that color, it's going to be more prominent. Those speckles are going to be more prominent on your image. We're going to start working on the leaves, and I'm using the same technique as I had with the flowers. This time I'm using Evergreen Bough as the darkest color. So I'm applying that towards the bottom of the leaf, which is closest to the stem. I'll go all around that area, blending that up. And then I'll come in with Shabby Shutters. And these are two colors I haven't typically used out of my Distress Oxide collection. And I really like how that came out. That Shabby Shutters is brighter than I thought it would be. So I do the same thing on both of these leaves. I just have two of them. And then here is the Shabby Shutters. And you can see I do flip-flop between my blending tools, just kind of whatever is handy. And like I said, that Shabby Shutters really surprised me, and I love how it blended with that Evergreen Bough. So a little bit back and forth, just making sure they have kind of a seamless blend. And then I decided to do the same thing with this one by adding the water speckles. I actually kind of wish I wouldn't have, because the green for some reason just, it oxidizes differently, so it's not going to show a bright white. It almost kind of shows a bluish hint to it, but still looks great, and I'm not redoing it. Then I'm just going to take the coordinating dies, line them up. I'm going to hold it in place with some purple tape, and then I'll run these through my die cut machine. And like I said, these cut pretty close to the actual image of the flowers and the leaves. So here's a look at all of them die cut out. I love all of these colors together. This purple with those greens, great, great combination. For the background, I decided to get a little bit more artsy and add some interest to it. So I'm taking a black piece of cardstock and I'm attaching the Rice Paddies stencil. I'm just using some purple tape. I always flip mine over and attach it this way. That way I can move my stencil around if I want to. And I'm bringing in Pumice Stone Distress Oxide. This one is kind of like a lightish gray, and I am going fairly light. I didn't want it to stand out a lot. So I'm just going to go over that with this blending brush, which gets in between those stencil pieces really well. And I'm okay if it's kind of scattered where it's darker in one area and lighter in the other. So just brushing that down. I knew my petals, my leaves and flowers would be towards the bottom of the card, so I didn't go all the way down with that. Now once I have everything done, everything is die cut, I'm going to start arranging my card. Now this actually took me some time. I wanted the flowers to be up higher than the leaves. So I'm just kind of starting out here, laying out how I wanted to go. That did take me some time, so I did go off camera and really kind of figure out where I wanted it all to go. Then once I was happy with it, I leave mine in place and I start with my image that's the furthest in backs. And then I start just attaching that with some tape runner. I have some that are going to hang off the side. Some are going to be peeking out from behind those leaves. And I'll do that for all of them. I did think about popping some up with foam squares, but there was just so much going on. I just decided it was best to just leave them all attached with the tape runner. And I didn't add any foam squares for the dimension or anything. Now, if you're watching this video between March 12th and March 16th of 2019, Neat Tangled does have a March Madness sale going on right now. You can head over to the website, check in the March Madness sale section, and there is a discount code that you can enter to get 30% off those items in that March Madness section. So definitely be sure and head over and check it out. Lots of great stuff in that section. Once I had everything glued down, I did take this to my Tim Holtz paper trimmer and just trim off those excess edges, all of those pieces that were hanging off the edge. And my piece of black cardstock here is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so it is just an A2 size card base that I had started with. And then for the sentiment, "You are stronger than you think," a very great encouraging sentiment, I had just die cut a piece of white cardstock using the Skinny Strips die and stamped that sentiment in black ink. This is off of the Lovely Lotus stamp set. And then I'm just taking some sequins mix and adding that, adding some of them around my floral images with some liquid glue and my jewel picker. Now, any of the sequins mixes would work for this because the ones I used are kind of an iridescent. They're not really a colored one. And then I did top it off with some unicorn stickles, which is just a really pretty, clear, sparkly little accent to add to those. So I really hope you enjoyed today's card project. If you did, be sure to give the video a big thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. All the supplies will be listed down below in the video description and also on the blog. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a great day.